Good evening, everybody. Yes, I'm out here again in the dark. At least it's not cold tonight, though. Not near as cold as it was yesterday. It was. Last night was very cold. It wasn't fun. It wasn't my cup of tea. No, I don't like it. Anyway, winter just start. I mean, it's just getting into it, and I'm already ready for spring to be here, like tomorrow. That's that's how much I don't like the cold. As soon as it gets cold, I'm praying, the Lord, let us hurry up and get through this. Let us hurry up and get through this. That's all I can say. I'm threatening it. Anyway. No, it wasn't a very eventful day, David. I did find out I'm still having issues with my car. I think I replaced the wrong part. So that's not good news. But good news is the other part's not too expensive. So, but I still got, it's in the same place the other one was. So it's going to be just hard. I mean, I got to do the whole thing, just pretty much almost the same thing over again. But hey, hopefully this will fix it. So, and bad news, I do have a flat tire. So, I gotta have a tire too on top of it. But hey, I'm not gonna let the devil get me down. No way. He had to poke a hole in my tire, so what? It's gonna be alright. You know? I might have to catch a ride for a few days again. I don't know until I get it fixed. We'll see. The Lord will provide. He always does. I say you have faith. That's the whole point. That's one of them tests. I told y'all the test was coming. I told y'all there was another test coming. Devil will always be throwing something at me. And Lord, but the Lord wants me. He knows. That reminds me, every time I have a test up, I think about Job. That's what you gotta think about. Think about Job. Poor old Job. Boy. That was a test. But hey. He got tenfold in the end. So, I bet you he thought it was worth it. Anyway, where are we at? Tonight's message, we're in 1 Chronicles 26. And, this message titled David and the Sacred Servants, Keepers of the Gate, and Stewards of the Treasure. This chapter talks about some lesser known aspects of service of God. These roles that really, that not only are these roles, they're David enacted these roles, for the worship in the house and the temple, and today they're relevant within the church, but they're also relevant to us personally, as a metaphorical role of what happens internally. There's an external application of these roles, there's also an internal application of these roles. So that's what we're going to go through. So this chapter details this meticulous organization of these the Levites. Of course, we've already looked at the priests and the musicians, and now these are two other critical divisions of the Levites that were organized for the future worship in the temple. And these roles are called gatekeepers and treasurers. Some places in the Bible it talks about keepers of the gate, and treasurers are also called stewards. Keepers of the gate also called porters. That's another word that's used in King James Version. They call them porters, but they're gatekeepers. And this chapter demonstrates how David, his deep commitment to establishing this system of organization, security, and administrative integrity to reinforce the truth that meticulous planning is also a form of worship. Being organized and being able to plan. It's important to God. So, the first part of this chapter talks about the gatekeepers. And gatekeepers were responsible for guarding the sanctity of the temple space and controlling access and maintaining order. And the selection of these personnel highlights the themes of divine appointment and the reward for their previous faithfulness, because the gatekeepers were taken from the line of Obed, which was Obed-Edom, which, remember, the Ark of the Covenant had to stay at his house for a period of time when David and them disobeyed and did something. They tried to transport it the wrong way, and they had to turn aside. So, as it details that this personnel were not chosen arbitrarily, but were descendants of this established Levitical families, particularly, as I said, Obed-Edom's. They were blessed because of course, they said Obed-Edom had that ark there, and he was blessed by it because he had reverence for it, and he had the proper respect and reverence for that ark. So his family was blessed because of it. And here we see that as his family is still being blessed by that event. And this family became a pretty large family. It says they were large in number, and they were strong. They had some proven strength. So it underscored their stability or their suitability for the security role. They were going to be they were the bouncers. They were security. They were the gatekeepers. They were guards. And then it goes through the different the different names of the sons of Obed-Edom that were in these certain division of the gatekeepers. It showed, it said that there was eight sons, which showed the divine multiplication and blessing. And then of course it highlights that they were mighty men of valor, which means that they were strong. They were strong and courageous. They were mighty men of valor. And those roles are. It goes on and tells about how their roles were chosen. Again, it talks about they were chosen by Lot, as far as the gates, the specific gates, which they were assigned to. There were different gates. There was the east and west, north and south gates, and they were assigned by lot to which gate that they would be responsible for guarding. And that this practice signified that all posts, whether visible or hidden, are seen as a divine appointment and an expression of impartiality. The comprehensive assignment covered all four cardinal directions to ensure complete security. Like I said, there's north, south, east, and west, and they surrounded it. They made sure that everything was covered, and their roles were appointed directly by God, which direction that they would cover. And then it goes on to tell that the Hoses family was appointed as chief men, and they were charged of the watches that serving as gatekeepers. And they were assigned by the youngest to the oldest. Then we go on to this next part of the chapter talks about the treasurers or the stewards. And these were the ones that managed the dedicated things that were the temple. The main thing that I said that there was administrative and financial. This was administration of the financial and material assets of the temple. And this part emphasizes that meticulous stewardship and administrative integrity are essential and sacred parts of God's service. And their core responsibilities were involved managing, all the treasures of the house of God, and it included the regular offerings, and also all the vast spoils of war that David had accumulated from all the battles that he had fought, and all the battles that his mighty men had fought, and all the spoils that they had brought back. This was all part that because David dedicated everything that he got to the Lord, to the house, so at the house of God. So all this stuff, they had this vast stored up treasure, and then these treasurers, the stewards, were the ones that took care of that, managed that, and handled that, and they were over that. This highlights the importance of honesty and diligence in managing assets dedicated to God. So it goes on and tells about the different families that were appointed to these roles, to be the treasurers and to be over this financial means of the house of God. Then it goes on to tell that how some of the stewards had external administration duties for the house of God. There were some that was internal, but some external. There was he appointed what he called officers and judges for the civil both civil and religious governance throughout Israel. So this showed his how David wanted to integrate both faith and public life. So he appointed these certain stewards to be over the external public life, and they called them officers and judges. You had the treasurers in the house of the Lord, then you had the officers and judges in the external public life. So the appointment of the officers and judges and scribes, there were scribes too, they talked about the scribes over Israel. And then it goes on to list the different ones, the regions that they were they were in charge of. And altogether that there were 270 capable men that were responsible for both the service of the Lord and the service of the king. So the service of the Lord and the service of the king, that meant in the house of the Lord and outside the house. They were in service to both of them, because it was both faith, the religious service in the faith in the house, and plus out in the public life. So this, even though this seems like kind of this dry administrative list that goes through this, because it goes, listing each one of these and what their duties was, but it's vital because it establishes a pattern of order and faithfulness that is demanded by God in this preparation of his dwelling place that David felt that he was responsible for. And this meticulous organization that he did prefigures the ultimate order and perfection of the Messiah's kingdom, and ensures the continuity. I'm having a hard time saying words today. Of sacred worship. Continuity. There we go. I said it right that time. I took a nap earlier. My brain ain't woke up yet, I guess. This points to the gospel by the principle of substitutionary service and perfect access. The Levites served as the gatekeepers, facilitating limited access to God's presence. And in the New Covenant, Jesus is the ultimate gate. Jesus is considered as the gate. He's our access to God. We get, but through Jesus Christ, we have direct access to God. He is the mediator. He is the gate. He grants us immediate and direct access to God the Father, having perfectly fulfilled the law and service. He is also our model of perfect stewardship, having perfectly managed the Father's will and purpose. Just as the dedicated treasures accumulated through sacrifice and managed by stewards pointed toward the ultimate, just like those treasures, Jesus is our treasure. And he also points to this, the inexhaustible and perfect stewardship of across the sacrifice that he made on the cross was the stewardship of his. It was a type of stewardship in that he took his role seriously, and to protect what he saw important, that was important and valuable to God, which was the salvation of mankind. That's the most valuable thing, is that people are saved. And so he was a steward of our salvation. And for spiritual growth, this chapter teaches us that all forms of service are sacred in God's economy, the kingdom's economy. And whether we are in a visible, prominent roles, like as we've seen in the last chapter, we talked about the singers and the musicians, they had a very prominent role that David, gave to them. But, they had there's these less visible administrative type roles, which is given to these treasurers. Um, but this highlights that faithfulness and integrity are what matter most, no matter what the role is. So this chapter pretty much calls the believer to apply these ancient duties inwardly as well. So it's like I said, they have external application to the church itself, but they also have an internal application to the believer individually. We are all called to be gatekeepers of our hearts by diligently guarding our minds and affections. This means keeping watch over the entry points of our thoughts and refusing access to things that defile and may that would, anything that is negative thoughts, dark thoughts of death and despair, things of that nature, things that are outside of God's will. Those type of thoughts, we have to guard our minds. And when we guard our minds, that we don't let them things get into our minds. They don't get into our heart. They don't affect our hearts. So that's how we guard our hearts. We have to refuse access to these things, and to maintain our purity in our inner sanctuary. Our heart is our inner sanctuary, and so we're being a gatekeeper, like those gatekeepers were to keep things out of the temple. We are the temple, and we have to guard our heart. That's the gate. And simultaneously, we are to be stewards of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit resides in us. That's our treasure. The Holy Spirit, the anointing of the Holy Spirit is our treasure, and that treasure resides in the temple. The treasure's in the temple. So the power and gifts that the Holy Spirit gives, like I said, that's the treasures. That's like the silver and the gold, and those are entrusted to us, not to use for our own personal gain or for our own personal glory, but for service of our King and for building up the church. We're supposed to be good stewards of those gifts that God has given us, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So, to summarize this, we're called to be spiritual gatekeepers of our hearts and minds, and faithful stewards of the resources, gifts, and calling we have received. And our spiritual valor is demonstrated not only in outward acts, but in the hidden diligence and honesty required for godly administration. Our diligence, integrity, and valor in managing both our inner walk and our spiritual gifts demonstrate the faithfulness required in God's eternal service. So we're faithful gatekeepers, we're faithful stewards, we're keepers of the gate and stewards of the treasure. We show God that we are faithful to His service, that we will be faithful servants in the kingdom. If we can do that every day, that we prove that. But job well done. That's what Jesus said. He would say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's part of being a good and faithful servant. We already talked about, the priests. And that's how, and the musicians, that's part of our worship, and how we, being a priest is, prayer and and reading the word and all that kind of stuff. Then we talked about the musicians, and that's how we that has a lot to do with our musical worship, but it also has to do with it, since it said music was part of prophesying. That's part of prophecy. And then now this is talking about gatekeeping and steward, being gatekeepers and stewards, and this is how we maintain the access and the gifts. How we maintain the access and of God's presence, of His indwelling and the Holy Spirit in us, and also how we use rightly use the things that He has given us in His service. So, I guess I covered everything. But anyway, I guess that's it for tonight's message. But I love y'all, and I will see y'all back here tomorrow.